All right, on this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, we are going kind of straight to the source here to talk about what just transpired to get the International Longshoremen's Association, which went on strike on Tuesday. These are the workers in the ports on the East and Gulf Coast, back to work, get an agreement with the U.S. Maritime Alliance. I can't think of anyone better to talk to than our good buddy, Bill Doyle. Bill, how you doing, young man?
I'm doing good. It's a great day. All the ports are open on the East and Gulf Coast. The guys are back to work. Commerce is flowing. Distribution centers, truckers are back to work. So it's a good day.
Well, I'm happy about that. That's been something we've been going for. So, Bill, I'm not going to mess around here. We're going to get right to the matter. Is what can you tell us about what transpired? Because I got to tell you, I had people following me on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and I was telling people, man, this looks like it's going to happen soon. And I was told, Sal, you're nuts. This is a week or two. It's not going to get resolved. And man, all of a sudden it popped on Thursday. And so, what can you tell us?
Well, Sal, I mean, you know what? You and I both discussed this on Monday, and we said this thing wasn't going to go longer than a week. I mean, we had surmised that. We had said that reasonable minds would come to the table and get an agreement, and that's what they did. Now, there was a lot of talk out there. Oh, the union wants 78% wages. All right, look. Right now, what this is called is an extended agreement. What the ILA and the USMX agreed on were the wages. Okay? 6.54433 for 6 years. Okay, so those are the percentage increase. In order to get there and get that done, what the ILA and USMX agreed to is let's put all the other issues to the side, including automation. Okay, so with the automation and issues related to the royalties, that was set aside to discuss further. And then as they discussed that further, the contract extends to January 15th. So the ILA membership doesn't have to ratify what just happened yesterday. Everybody went back to work this morning.
That's the news we wanted to hear. I mean, it was just such huge news. We saw it pop. We saw the announcement come out, the joint statement from both the ILA and the Maritime Alliance. So pay was obviously the issue. Automation is the issue. That seemed to have been, everyone's focusing a lot on the automation side. And I was wondering if there's anything you can talk about specifically regarding that piece of the equation there, what they came to, because that was seeming to be the main sticking point. It's the one we heard in the news kind of all the time.
Yeah, I think what you had here is Harold Daggett, the president of the ILA. He has been talking about automation for decades. And where he really brought it forward, I was at a meeting. I was the U.S. Federal Maritime Commissioner in 2016 under the Obama administration, before Trade Point Atlantic was built. So it was still the old Sparrows Point shipyard. And all the cabinet secretaries, Department of Transportation, Department of Labor, Department of Commerce, congressmen, all came to what was then a building that had a conference table. And at that conference table, everyone was discussing what was going to come forward with this new Trade Point Atlantic center, for distribution and ships. And Harold stood up. He was there with his son, Dennis. And after everyone talked and patted each other on the back, Harold stood up and said, hey, listen, I have a problem with automation. Any of these new terminals, anything that's coming in, you need to discuss it with the ILA. So I think, that itself will be discussed, in the coming months. And as I said, earlier this week, there is a provision in the existing collective bargaining agreement related to automation. It's called new technology. Okay. So that new technology, if the employer, if management, if a marine terminal operator wants to introduce a new type of automation, they're required to work with the ILA, get the acquiescence of the ILA, see what the impact is on the jobs. That may not have happened all the time during the term of the collective bargaining agreement. I think that's going to be tightened up. I think what you see is what's known as maybe a tiger team. There'll be an innovation team. There'll be some sort of group for that joint new technology team that will come forward in the next agreement. I'd also like to say, go ahead.
No, no, go finish up.
Yeah, I'd also like to say that, President Biden, Secretary of Labor, Julie Su, they were intricately involved in not per se the negotiations, but talking to the stakeholders out there. President Biden, talked to the retailers. He talked directly to the highest levels of Amazon, Home Depot, Lowe's, Target, all of those, the shippers, saying, look, I want these guys to get a deal. Julie Su, who was the Secretary of Labor, I don't know why the media keeps calling her acting secretary. She is the Secretary of Labor, was up there for the past 2 days. I'm not saying that she drove these negotiations. She was a voice of reason to both sides, and she deserves a lot of credit to getting this thing over the finish line.
I'm not a big person when I talk about government intervention. I'm really not. But what I do want is government facilitating and helping and doing that kind of mediating to get the two sides in. And it's funny from both sides. I had impromptu people tell me it's like Julie Su was the key. I mean, she was really essential for being able to create the dialogue. I mean, she didn't hash out. I mean, she wasn't hashing out the agreement, but she was really kind of the air reason, which is what you want. I mean, that's what you need sometimes between two big personalities and two big issues like the Maritime Alliance and the ILA. And I always go back to this too, Bill, is, we're seeing automation on the West Coast. We saw, TrayPack and the LBCT terminal. We saw the APM terminal go. But that's a different mechanism on the West Coast. I mean, container ships come into the West Coast and dump 80% of their containers into LA and Long Beach and maybe go to one other port. On the East Coast, the Gulf Coast, a lot different. You're dropping 20, 30% of your containers off. And I'm not 100% sure that these container liners really want to get into a arms war of automation in the ports in there. Plus, it's so expensive. I don't think everyone... I kept hearing the National Retail Federation guy on all these channels talking about the fact that we're behind Rotterdam, Singapore, and Shanghai. It's like 7.4% of the world's terminals are automated. It's not a lot. It's like personnel do give you a flexibility that you don't have with automation. It's an extremely expensive issue, and these ocean carriers are busy spending their money on new ships because they got to replace their current fleets. They don't have the millions, if not billions, to come in and replace it. So I think automation is really a tough one. I was really interested too on your perspective about the entire, because it seemed to end very quickly. I mean, you and I thought it was going to end quickly, but I got to say on Thursday or Wednesday at one point, I was like, maybe not. This seemed all of a sudden to the tension seemed to ratchet up. You and I were both using what we had to talk things. You had a LinkedIn talking about the ocean carriers. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what do you think was the key that kind of spurred them on? Because what we've seen here is an amazing difference. We're watching ships right now coming into New York, New Jersey. We had seen the pile up off the coast. This was going to get bad very quickly. Sea Intelligence did a great study where they said in the 3.5 days of the strike, you had about 5% of the world's container fleet jammed up. Right. Off, and in a week it's going to be 10%. In 2 weeks it's going to be 20%. This had the potential to get bad very quickly. So I was wondering about that perspective of yours.
Yeah, I mean, so as you know, Sal, I was down in Houston, and Galveston, Monday, Tuesday, flew back up, Wednesday. But what I saw off of Galveston Beach, you can see the queue, and most of it, it's kind of like when you go over the Bay Bridge and you look over to the right, if you're heading into Eastern Maryland, you see all the ships. All those, that's a federal anchorage. The federal anchorage off of Galveston Beach, it's usually bulkers. You see bulkers. But by Monday night going into, and by the time Tuesday morning came around, I was going to a meeting at the Army Corps of Engineers headquarters in Galveston. I saw container ships on the hook, and we took a ride down to the entrance, the mouth of the Houston Ship Channel. So it's Galveston, Houston Ship Channel coming up. And there were ships queuing up Tuesday. I'm like, oh boy, here it comes. Nothing is going up that Houston Ship Channel by way of Ro-Ro or container ship. But on the side of, who was involved, there were a lot of unions that were involved. The NEBA, Roland Rexa, the Secretary Treasurer of MEBA. He was a huge piece of this, an advocate and a voice of reason for the ILA, with the ILA. You had the SIU. A big part of what happened here is the ILA exempted, for all intents and purposes, the U.S. flag international fleet, Jones Act fleet, and worked those ships. They also exempted the cruise ships, but there's a lot of unions that are seagoing unions on board ships that said, okay, listen, you got our support, but America first. You got to work our ships. We'll help you. Let's get a deal. But in the interim, please. And you know what? The ILA did it. They said, okay, we're going to work those ships. We'll work the U.S. flag Jones Act fleet.
Yeah, listen, I'm I watch this thing, I'm detached. I watch this thing and I watch the entire thing unfold in a very, as about as much as anybody can. And I had two takeaways. Number one, I think the ILA, Daggett is a magnet. He's a magnet for obvious reasons. But I think he made the point, the reason that people learned about this was Daggett. I mean, Daggett said he was going to take him on strike. He's a magnetic personality out of central casting, and people were talking about him. But at the same time, too, I think the ILA and Maritime Alliance, I'll say the same thing about them, have got to up their communication again. They were terrible at doing this. I don't think either side was very good in articulating their, what was going on. I thought Daggett, when he did his video a couple of weeks ago, the cripple me drowned it out some key points that he had that I thought was really, really important. And the Maritime Alliance at the same time. I mean, we wouldn't be in the world we're in without global shipping and, the transportation we have. That from being at the FMC and being in the Port of Baltimore, it derives such great wealth for us. It's an amazing thing. I know you got a limited time. I want to ask you, okay, we got the agreement. They're back at work. The ships are moving. We've got, a longshoremen. Longshoremen are ecstatic. I got notes from people saying, I learned more from you than I did from my own union about what was going on. But, what's next? That January 15th date's out there. I tend to think we'll probably have something hammered out before then, because it seems like they're really good on that. What do you think is the next step going forward? And what should we take from this so that, 6 years from now, 2030, when you and I are doing this in wheelchairs and we're talking about this and we're discussing it, that, we avoid this?
Yeah. Well, Harold Daggett, and you brought it up, the cripple you statement. He's a throwback. He's 79 years old and he's gregarious and he's a big guy and he's been around for a long time. Doesn't necessarily have email, doesn't necessarily have a cell phone, but when he gets moving on something, he does it. So Harold talks in those terms. He talks in the terms of Elizabeth, New Jersey, Bayonne Bridge, Staten Island, New Jersey. That's him. And, when it's all said and done and he leaves, we're going to miss him. But yes, the communication could have been upped on both sides. I did say that President Biden was talking to the retailers. He was also talking to the ocean carriers, the international ocean carriers, the people that you and I know at the highest level: CMA, CGM, Mediterranean Shipping Company, Maersk, Hapag-Lloyd, Costco. I mean, he was talking to all of them. For going forward, yes, the best thing to do is, write this language, get the language, get it ironed out. And I believe that that's going to be left to, at least on the union side, Dennis Daggett. And I know Dennis Daggett can get this done. And, over the next several weeks, there'll be language going back and forth. Nobody wants to go through this again. All right. We've already been through this fire and boat drill. And, hopefully the USMX and the union will come to an agreement on these terms.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting. I've seen Dennis give a talk. I mean, he's got a lot of his father in him, but at the same time, he's an amazing communicator. He is, when he gives a talk, I mean, I think he's going to be a worthy kind of adversary in this relationship. I think he's going to be a challenge for Maritime Alliance. I really do. I think he's really good. It's amazing to me. I've been asked repeatedly about this. American organized labor has been on the downward trend for quite a bit. And I actually think this may be a moment where people are looking as like, man, look what organized labor just got for the longshoremen. I mean, they got them a 62% raise over 6 years. And, we see, labor really being at the mercy of industry. And yet what the ILA did there was really represent a unified front on the ports. I had people tell me months ago, Bill, there's no way the workers in Houston go on strike. It's a right to work state. Charleston, you saw what Governor DeSantis was talking about. There was talking about National Guard going into Florida. Let me be clear. I mean, that was a good show of force right there, but I don't think they were going to be able to move any containers. They weren't going to be able to offload any ships. It sounded great, but I don't think it moved the needle at all in many ways. I think everyone made the point. We saw what this could do and the damage it could do to the economy. And I think, first off, everyone got cooler heads. They came back in. I don't think, beyond people panicking and grabbing toilet paper for some strange reason, that we're going to have any really major long interim impacts. I think one of the greatest things this did is actually raise the cognizance of how crucial our maritime sector is and why it's so important that we spend some time, attention, infrastructure on it. And I just want to give you the last word here on your takeaways from this event and what you think we can look forward to coming next couple of weeks. And more importantly, what does this mean in the long term for us?
Yeah. Well, thanks for that, Sal. I did see the picket signs down in Houston. Okay. I was watching the press clips in South Carolina. I'll agree with you on, what Governor DeSantis tried to do in Florida. First of all, a National Guard person is not going to go up and work on a crane. Okay. The insurance companies that insure those cranes aren't going to let the National Guard go up and operate these cranes, or a forklift for that matter. So yeah, that was all show. I do think that it worked out. There was unity. I said that I was in Texas. When I flew back on Wednesday, I came into BWI, and because the Francis Scott Key Bridge is down, you now get routed under the 895 tunnel. I came out of the tunnel and I went into the port and went down to the picket line with the guys and talked to Scott Cowan, the local president of ILA 333. They were all united. But you know what? They're all hopeful. This wasn't a, raise your fist, the hell with management. It was, we want a fair deal here and we're ready to go back to work. But this is what it takes for us, to get a deal. So they were all unified behind the ILA leadership. And then I would say that, what do we see for the future? You're right on organized labor. There's a time to fight. Usually labor wins when there's few employees and the economy is booming. Okay. And the management at the other side of the table is flush. All of that was in effect here. It was no secret. The ocean carriers made a lot of money. Marine terminal operators made a lot of money over the past couple of years. The ILA, very skilled workforce. They can't just be replaced. And then I would say, as a point, and I was looking at the comments after you and I spoke earlier this week. You had somebody say, put on there, well, you know what? Automate it all. Robots don't strike. And then some guy came on and said, and robots do not buy Christmas presents. So that's where we're at, Sal. And, we'll keep in touch.
Yeah, I agree. I got so many comments from our last discussion, and we were talking ahead of time, and we were days ahead of the strike. And I really appreciate your insight. I think you and I were hitting on some key points there, talking about it. And again, I think it raises attention so much on the maritime sector, how crucial this role is for everyone. I think everybody begins to realize that, and we've seen a lot of shocks hit the system, everything from, the supply chain crisis during COVID, to the Ever Given, to the Houthi attacks, to Dolly taking the bridge out in Baltimore. There was a lot of tension in Baltimore. We saw that kind of manifest itself quite a bit. They were out of work for 2 months and now they're out of work again. One of the things I was really amazed with was the comments I got from ILA members who were just absolutely behind this. I mean, that was really impressive to me, is the fact that all the locals were behind this. And for the ILA members and USMX members, I might say, who got so, the focus was on wages. And in truth, if you look at the top CEOs of all these entities, they get paid a lot, but the workers don't. And I understand people want to look at what ILA longshoremen get, but I talked to a guy, it's like 6 years to get full-time. It is, you have to work 20 to 40 extra hours a week to earn that big figure. I mean, he's doing DoorDash to make money. It's like any other job. It is, there are people in jobs who make a lot of money. There are people in mid-management who make money, but in truth, these guys and women were fighting for what they felt was the next evolution of them. And in the long run, this may be an issue. We may see some higher costs, but right now I think it was a great fight for them to be able to do it. And I think there are lessons to be learned from this. Bill, I want to thank you again for coming on and providing your insight. It's always great to have you on.
Well, I tell you what, Sal, I heard from both the companies, the ocean carriers, marine terminal operators, and labor. And it's your show. Your show plays a big part in what happens in the maritime industry because you do shine the light on it. And I think that you bring a great public service. So congratulations to you too, sir.
Well, I appreciate that. It's nice of you to say, Bill. Well, next time, hopefully it's another strike where we bring Bill back on. But I have a feeling that there'll be another maritime issue that'll be looming on the horizon in the future. Bill, thank you again for being with us.
You take care now. Thank you.